Hey folks, Heretic here. Today in the Battlegrounds, we're going to be talking about pivoting. Why we pivot, when we pivot. People ask me all the time, how do I pivot? When do I pivot? And I have so many questions for them. It's, well, what turn is it? How much health do you have? How many people are alive in the lobby? Do you have your quest done? What is your quest reward? You know, what's your hero? What tribes are in? There's so many questions and people just want a blanket answer. They want to know when to do it with each hero and each tribe and each situation. And unless I can sit there next to you and tell you, it's hard to answer that question in a vague state. So we're going to look at some examples. We're going to look at some different builds and maybe ideas about why we would pivot or what that even really means in some cases to some people. Is pivoting a complete switch? Like I'm going from Murlocs to Beast? Or is pivoting a tiny bit? You know, more of a technical change, more of a countering of your opponent. I mean, they're all accurate descriptions of pivoting because it's going from one thing to something else. Maybe not entirely, maybe just a little bit of a turn, but enough of a turn that it wins you the game ultimately, which is what we're looking for. So typically the reasons you're going to pivot are, well, first, you find a better direction. So what I mean when I say you find a better direction is pivoting from X to Y and Y. Well, let's say in this example, X is you have a pirate board. Let's say you have some random pirates. You have a Peggy and a Brand. So you're feeling pretty good because Peggy's triggering and buffing your random pirates. And you got a Brand, so you're generating extra cards. So you feel pretty confident in this. But let's look at some other things. Well, regardless of what the quest is in this scenario, let's just say it's a Murloc lobby. So you already know stats are going to get really big. As much APM as you can play, the Murlocs are always going to outstat you, or they're going to summon extra minions from hand, they're going to have venom, and ultimately you're going to be in trouble. So let's say now you roll the shop, you're at tier 6, and in the shop you have a Primal Fin, a Young Murkai, and a Tethys. Well, shoot, you've already got a Bran, got a Peggy. So those work great with Tethys. Now you can cycle more cards, you'll generate extra cards. But hold on a second. Let's also look at this and say, there's a Primal Fin and a Young Murkai. That means we can play the Young Murkai. We already have a Brand we've established, so we play the Primal Fin. That's going to give us 2 Murlocs right off the discover, and then at the end of every turn, we're going to get 2 more Murlocs. And eventually, if we generate other Primal Fins, we can really snowball. So the question is, do we pivot? And once again, we have to look at all these other questions. What are the quests we have? Does it synergize with one thing or another? What's the hero we have? And with there being so many heroes, it's hard in this hypothetical to tell you what to do because there's so many different types of heroes and what they can do. So you really need to look at your board. You come up with any hero you want and ask yourself these questions. It's like, okay, well, this is what I have, and this is the shop. What's probably going to be the best result? What do I want to play? Personally, I always want to go Tethys. Why? Because I love pirates. I love APM. I love cycling a whole lot. But hold on a second. Young Murkai and Primal Fin, and we already have a Brand, can generate a lot of cards too. So that's essentially an APM board being generated also. I've had plenty of Murloc games where I can't play all the cards they generate, especially depending on the hero. Say you're a Shutterwalk where you can trigger the battle cry extra times. Or say you're a Trade Prince Gallywix and you're banking the gold. And both of those heroes work with pirates also. And that's where it gets hard to tell you what to do. It is such a layered question that people always ask me. But in this case, it's relatively easy to me. And here's why. Because pirates are a ton of fun to play and are good when you have that kind of state of board going. But Murlocs in the current game are crazy, cuckoo, banana powerful and raffle stomp most lobbies. So the question is, do you want to just have fun and finish top 4? Because with those cards, you probably can finish still top 4, even in win potentially. But with Murlocs, and with that shop, assuming it's just like turn 10, the entire lobby's still alive and you're incredibly strong fighting a weak opponent, you are going to be insane with this board. So you're better off in this case, if you want to win overall, going Murlocs by far in the current meta. Now it might change later, but in the quest meta right now, Murlocs are kind of ridiculous. So in this scenario, you should go Murlocs. But hindsight 2020, maybe we roll bad, maybe we get nothing, and the pirates would have given us everything we need. You never know. But if we just go by the scaling that we understand of the game right now, the play is to go Murlocs. All right, let's look at the next example. This is going to be pivoting to another tribe and why we pivot to another tribe. So in the example we have here, it's turn 9. I have a board full of dragons, dragon-ish minions. And because of that, you know, we're a dragon board, right? No, we're not a dragon board because we don't have a win condition. We don't have a Kalecgos on the board. We have no way to scale that engine. There's no end of turn crazy ignition specialist going. We're just kind of have a nice tempo dragon board. Now our quest reward we've already completed. We're getting 3 random spells a turn, so we can do whatever. So what do? Well, in this scenario, we have some triples. So let's see where the triples take us. It offered us a dragon ignition specialist. We definitely could go with that for dragons to continue down that route. But at the same time, it offered us a Savjz, which would be more spell generation. Not as good as the ignition specialist because that gives us 2 a turn and our board's already all dragons. So we disregard the Savjz in this scenario. But we look at the Slither Spear and we go, well, that is a win condition. That is a straight out full-on win condition, but we'd have to go full Naga. Well, a moment before, I'd used my spell that makes a random minion in the shop gold, and it made the Corrupted Myrmidon gold. So we're sitting here with a Slither Spear Lord of Gains and a golden Myrmidon. Are we going to stay dragons? No, we're going to leave dragons behind. Could you have stayed dragons and tried to hard push into a Kalecgos? Yes. But now the problem is, well, you've got a Kalecgos, and yeah, you have a bunch of dragons, but you don't even have a brand. So you only have half of the win condition at best. Meanwhile, you passed on the Slither Spear and a Corrupted Myrmidon, which is an amazing combo. It's only turn 9. There's 7 people alive, and in this scenario, we're at 38 health because we're playing Patchwork. So in this scenario, it makes perfect sense, especially with our quest reward giving us spells, which makes Slither Spear better. Could we have forced dragons if we wanted to? Of course. Would we probably have finished 4th or 5th? Yeah, Slither Spear was the play here. It also didn't hurt that in the shop, in addition to the golden Corrupted Myrmidon, was already a Drakari enchanter. And when we played the golden Myrmidon, it gave us a Savjz, the Vindictive, on top of that. Now, had it given us a Kalecgos, could we have been like, oh, we could still go dragons? But once again, dragons, we only have part of the win condition because you have the Kalecgos, but you're missing the brand to really enable that. But when you already have the Corrupted Myrmidon, you're already looking at in the shop a Drakari, and you then get a Savjz, you're perfectly happy to play Naga in this scenario. Could it have backfired? Could we have found nothing? Of course. But with dragons, we already had nothing. So in this scenario, it made the most sense to switch to Naga. Now let's look at the next example. In this example, we have a very strong dragon board. We have a brand, we have a Kalecgos, we have some nice big stats, we have shields, we have a random Bramble Witch, but we're up against another dragon board. And so the combat begins in our first time fighting this person in a while, and they have a golden Kalecgos. And then they see a young Murkai, and then you see they have 2 peckish Feldrakes, and you're looking at their board and you realize, I cannot outscale this with my brand and my Kalecgos. So what do? Do we double down? Do we say, okay, we're gonna get another Kalecgos, we're gonna golden the brand, and we are going to try to outscale them? Or do we say, it's time to be a little bit more nimble and switch? Now, not necessarily a full pivot in this scenario, potentially, but at least start taking some scam cards so we can counter the raw stats they have. You look at their board, they don't have any Divine Shield. They have no summon from hand currently. They're not playing around anything yet. Now, we haven't fought them in a while, so who knows what they actually might change to, but we can imply that they're at least going to be pretty comfortable in their stats and think they can roll over us if we don't try to adapt. So during our shop phase, while we're fighting the dead guy, we know the other guy is fighting a pirate board. We go, okay, that dragon board's probably going to beat the pirate board unless it's infinite and very large. So we need to pick up a little scam just so we can be prepared. So what we do is we buy a Mansion Queen because that's all we can find. And we say, all right, next turn, we're going to find more depending on who wins their fight because the other person's probably going to be dead. Lo and behold, once the combat's done, we've beaten the dead guy, of course. we see that the dragon board has 1. We know they have giant stats. Now, we don't know what else they've changed, but we hover over them and we still see it's the same looking board from the information, what little we can gather. So the next turn, we have gotten all the scam we could. We've got the Bramble Witch good to go. We've got a golden Manton Queen and a regular Manton Queen, and we're pretty well set up as good as we could be. This is what we could find, and this was pretty good luck. We found some good stuff to try countering some of his stats. Since we haven't seen him in a couple turns, who knows exactly what he has, but I feel like this puts us in the best position. And as you can see, they're still doubled down on stats. They are just rocking and rolling. All the stats they've ever wanted. Look at the sheer size of this board. But suddenly, we go from barely having a chance to being heavily favored. You know, that's the big difference. That's kind of the counterplays you have to go with. If someone especially leans in so hard to what they're doing, and you know that you can find the counters for it, you can get that Manton Queen, you can get the Matador, you can get the Bramble Witch, and then you can take all of their stats and you can say they mean absolutely nothing. This is the kind of thing you have to do. And sometimes it's hard to beat people who have these ridiculous boards that have just statted away to no end. But if you keep chugging away at it, if you keep going into that route and they don't counter them appropriately, let's say in this scenario that they come back and they have some element of scam to counter our scam, now it's a fight. But if they just keep doubling down on those stats, if they say, you know what, I've got stats, I'm good, I can beat this, then you're going to crush them ultimately in the end, because there's a lot of ways to work around big stats in a lot of lobbies. You just have to pay attention to what tools are available for you to use. Now let's look at the next example I'm going to show you. In this example, we are playing Naga. In our opponent, we haven't fought in like 8 turns, but it says they're also playing Naga. Now we have no idea what they have, but we have Ice Block. We have a pretty damn good board set up. We're ready to go. So how do we go forward? Well, since we have Ice Block and we have a lot of stat generation, we figure let's go into the combat, see what happens, and then we can adapt accordingly depending on what they take. Now, if we look at our boards, we're essentially the same. We have maybe a hair more stats, but depending how hits play out, it's really easy for us to lose this combat with some bad swings. So we go into the combat and ultimately we do lose. We get beat down, the hits don't go our way, and we're looking at our opponent who is just running a big stat Naga board and we go, well, shit, what do we need to beat this board? So let's look and see what we can do to win. If we go to scaling, we're in trouble because they have a golden Lord of the Gains and a regular one and a Drakari. Now we have 2 normal ones and a Drakari. We already have a bigger corrupted Myrmidon, but once again, if the rest of their board gets scaled out, it won't matter as much if we're a little bigger on the corrupted Myrmidon front. So now we need to think, do we want to double down on stats and try pushing it? Or do we want to try countering by finding the minions that'll make us more powerful? And ultimately, I've put all the scam I can put together on the board because we need to work with the tools we have. We know they're going to outscale us. They double down on stats. They go heavier on shields. They would have destroyed us, but we've got Manton Queens in play now. We go out there and we get 2 Daggerspine Thrashers, which are perfect because we already have a bunch of spellcraft going off. We can easily get these triggered and get them to have all the effects we need. It doesn't matter if they're 1/1s. If they have Divine Shield, Wind Fury, Venom, who cares? They're gonna kill all these big stats. Yeah, they might bounce off the shields and we might have some bad hits, but then we have the Manton Queens in back and we already have some very large minions. So we're gonna get some variety and we're gonna be a threat to our opponent because we've adapted. They double down on stats. We already knew we couldn't win that arms race. So we switched so we could go more counter, because counter pivot is going to be better than trying to double down or trying to do a whole other build. Like we could have tried switching to Murlocs, and there are times when, you could switch, just pick up every Venom Murloc you can get a Tunnel Blaster, try summoning that out. You could definitely throw things at them, but in this case, we had a solid board lined up. We just needed to get a couple key counter cards so we could deal with their stats that they were just doubling down on. And I hope those examples of pivoting were helpful. I mean, some of them were more of a technical pivot than a full pivot, because a full pivot is so hard to explain. It depends completely on the board you're putting together. And I can throw a bunch of examples out there. I could put 4 different examples out there of a normal pivot. And then you can come back to me with 30 different examples with 30 different questions of pivots. Like, well, this was my setup. And I'm like, well, I gave you this. And they're like, yeah, but this and then this happened. And I'm like, yeah, I can't predict I cannot sit here and make a million videos that will tell you exactly what to do in every perfect scenario. I would be recording 24/7 and they would be constantly updating the game and I would be re-recording. And then you'd have to dig through the thousands of recordings to find the perfect playthrough scenario. Please just write an AI at that point, because I can't make that many videos, folks. I need to sleep at night. But I hope this helped a bit. It's hard to say. Pivoting is such a nuanced thing. It really comes with experience when to do it and when not to. Sometimes you're going to fail at the pivot. You're just not going to find the cards you need. You're going to be like, well, Heretic, that's great. I saw how you did it, but I can't find the cards I need. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes the pivot fails. If they're already bigger than you, if they're already outscaling you, odds are you're in bad shape. You are trying to pivot to take what should be a second place and turn it to a first. Or if, in the case of the early example where you are playing one tribe, switching to a whole new tribe can be difficult if you don't find the right cards. There's plenty of examples, highlight videos of people who pivot and turn it into the largest board ever. But there are millions of unrecorded videos of people dying horribly who never pull off the pivot or stick with a build that just doesn't work until they die. Thanks for watching all. I hope you learned a few things. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. I'm always interested and excited to hear about them. If you want to support us, please consider, following, liking, all that good stuff, though. It really does help the channel grow, and I love doing this. So please, all you can, means a lot to me. Thank you very much. I hope you learned a few things, and I'll catch you next time. Till then, have a good one. Later.